Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Welcome to Strategic Frontlines, the official YouTube channel of Center for Land Warfare Studies. As tensions between Moscow and the West are once again at a boiling point, in a week marked by military displays and economic pressure, Russia has signaled both strength and defiance. On 26th, Russia announced the testing of a nuclear-powered cruise missile amid rising confrontations with Ukraine. Russia has also tested its nuclear triad, launching missiles from land, air, and sea under President Putin's watch. In a conflict, however, this has gone beyond the battlefield and has triggered global repercussions, particularly with the West's involvement and a steadily increasing sanctions regime targeting not just Russia, but also the countries that are engaging with it. Thus, the last week also saw US's imposition of sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, striking at the core of Russia's oil economy. The Trump administration had also previously sanctioned New Delhi for purchasing Russian oil, accusing it of indirectly funding Moscow's war machine. And while India has maintained its composure, reports suggest that Indian refineries may pause new Russian deals amidst the uncertainty of the evolving sanctions. With this, I would like to introduce our panel for the evening. Air Marshal Rajesh Kumar is the former Commander-in-Chief of India's Strategic Forces Command. He's a veteran fighter pilot and a senior Air Force leader with depth expertise in strategic deterrence and nuclear command management. Mr. Nandan Unnikrishnan is a distinguished fellow at the Observers Research Foundation and leads the Eurasia Studies program after a long career in journalism. Dr. Kartha is an expert on Pakistan, counterterrorism, and South Asian security calculus. Earlier with the National Security Council Secretariat, now she is guiding the young generation of scholars as the Director for Research and Academics at CLAWS. I welcome all of you. With that, my first question to you, Air Marshal, will be how significant are these nuclear tests and especially the testing of the nuclear cruise missile in terms of technology and strategic advancement for Russia?
So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I just wanted to say that this test, it's been a long time coming. There were indications that this test could be conducted a few years ago, but I think there was a mishap, and it didn't happen. If you recollect, about 3 years ago, President Putin had said that Russia has a new generation of weapons. So this seems to be one of those offshoots in terms of nuclear delivery platforms. The fact that this missile has nuclear propulsion is a little worrying because that means that it really cannot be used for conventional delivery. It's purely a nuclear missile in that sense. Because even if you put a conventional warhead on it, if it goes and hits a target, it will have its nuclear fission remnants and signatures still over that particular target. So definitely there is no doubt that this is a nuclear weapon, and the fact that it has unlimited range. Now it is a low-level cruise missile which can fly as low as 50 meters. The fact that it is subsonic means it can be intercepted. And therefore, while it may have unlimited range, as is claimed by the Russians, it still is something that is interceptable. So it's not that it's a It's a weapon that has no counter to it. Um, and therefore, I think Western analysts are still trying to wrap their heads around the why such a weapon has been developed and what could be the real purpose behind it. But coming back to the fact that this test was conducted, and it was conducted amidst, um, nuclear exercises and some other signaling. So there has been a lot of nuclear signaling from um the Russian side during this entire special military operation. And some of it has been successful and some of it is not. It will take a long time to recap it. We're happy to take it on in the question and answers. But the fact is that uh, this is another nuclear signal that is being sent to the West. I think the Russians have convinced themselves that the Europeans are not going to stop fighting. And the Europeans are pretty convinced that if they allow uh, Russia to capture territory in Ukraine, Europe is the next is his next target. So I think this kind of uh, a mental kind of a deterrence model that has set in is what is causing all these little escalations and this repeated reference to the nuclear issue. So exercises, the fact that before this tactical nuclear weapons were positioned in Ukraine, that the doctrine was changed, and now these tests and exercises. Uh, so I think the temperature in the region is warming up, and sometimes when this nuclear signaling in the past has happened, it has been, Russia tried to draw some red lines. Unfortunately, those red lines were tested. And therefore, this time, I don't think there has been any mention of any red lines. But I think a mention of capability it has come from the Russian side. And that is what these tests and um, you know these exercises mean. So it is a clear signal to Europe mostly, because I think Russians do understand that there is a divergence of opinion between US and Europe as to how this Ukraine conflict should terminate. And therefore, what they're trying to do is to send signals to Europe to say that if you continue to um, arm and give weapons of uh, the type that are striking deep into Russia, they will respond and they may have a nuclear response to that issue. So there should be a limit to which the Europeans should be willing to extend help to Ukraine.
I think General Dushyant Singh has just joined us. Perhaps he'd like to come in at this point.
Uh, Thank you very much, Dr. Tara. And I just heard the remarks of Air Marshal Rajesh. So I tend to agree that nuclear saber rattling has been going on by Putin from quite some time, and he has drawn some red lines. But this time round, I think the messaging is slightly different. If you look at the current missile, which Skyfall is the US name, or the name given by the Western countries, and its Russian name is, it's very difficult to pronounce, Burvestenki. That is the Russian name. So its range is 14,000 kilometers, and it is a hypersonic missile. Now, it was not that Russia didn't have this range of missiles, but it is now a missile with a hypersonic capability. So therefore, it has the ability not to get intercepted by an American interception aircraft or any other air defense system. So therefore, this is a messaging also directly to the Americans. So to that extent, I feel that there is this little additional element of I should say, U.S. The Russian strategic communication in this round of ongoing conflict. The second big issue which we need to also keep in mind is that West itself is divided as of now. There is although there is a semblance of unity in the sense that NATO countries are getting together, but the US continues to demand more expenditure, whether it is from South Korea, whether it is from Japan. Even in Japan trip, he has asked them to spend more on defense and contribute more towards the guarantee to provide defense by the United States of America. And there is a reason for that, that the US itself is not economically very happily placed. Plus, it is also waging a tariff war. So, all in all, I think the Putin has taken a calculated gamble of giving this strategic communication. Plus, there is another factor which is different from other leaders in the past of USSR, erstwhile USSR, is that Putin also has the image of doing things what he says. It's like the Israelis. I was hearing the Israeli deputy chief of mission, Faris. His name is Farish. So he said that if somebody says that I will destroy you or I will threaten you, I believe that he's going to threaten me. So therefore, I'll be proactive and take action to defeat you or destroy you before you do something like that. So Putin also enjoys some kind of a image which is very difficult to predict. I agree that Trump today holds that crown of unpredictability, but even Putin also holds that crown of unpredictability, because if any president in the world in the recent history, I'm not talking of the past, if in the recent history has been waging wars, it has been Putin. Every term of his, right from the beginning, whether he was initially, there was a change of, initially he was president, then Medvedev became prime minister. You've seen every tenor of his. He has actually waged a war and kind of won all those wars, except Syria finally, because he got diverted into Russia-Ukraine war. What I'm trying to say is that two factors: strategic communication this time round. The second thing is about Putin's character, and the third thing is Russia is against the wall. You have cornered. There is always a good thing to leave a room to escape. There should be an off ramp available to your opponent. And I can say this from my practical experience. There is a feature which we almost captured it, and it's a massive feature. It still stands as an eyesore to us, but we attacked it from all directions. The adversary had no option but to sit down and fight, and finally we withdrew from that objective. And when we later came to know, there was just the company commander, one brave captain, and few soldiers, four or five of them. Had we pushed on that last minute bit, we would have probably taken that feature, and today it would have been ours, and a number of our tactical problems would have been resolved. So I think this off ramping, we keep pushing Putin to a limit. uh, there is a talk going on of tactical nuclear weapons being used by Putin, which seems to be quite real. Number of experts have been going around in the social media and seeing it. Some of them are quite reliable people. So this whole new narrative of the red flag, the stretching of the nuclear deterrence to tactical nuclear weapons is something which might happen in reality. Although I know our nuclear experts would say something different to what I'm trying to say, but I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate here, and let's see what the others have to say on this issue.
Okay, on the question of, the whole, what does Putin want? I mean, there is the Europeans, and time and again, I think, Nandan, you were also there when NATO had come, and NATO, that conference we had. They're convinced that Russia is going to attack Europe. Now, how much do you believe this? Or is it a question of this map we've put? Is he trying to straighten the lines so that he actually gets the entire Donbas? What is his objective here?
You're asking me, I assume.
Yes, I am.
Well,
Sorry.
firstly, thank you to Klaus for inviting me. I Actually, there has to be a slight historical background to this. I don't think this war started as a war for territory. Putin had his objectives were considerably different. They stay the same right now. And that was primarily to try and dissuade the West from incorporating Ukraine into NATO. That was his primary objective. And if I can recall, in April 2022, there was an attempt at a peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia, which they initialed in Istanbul. And that was based on the premise was that Ukraine accepts that it will be a neutral state. And in return, Russia returns all the territories that it had under its control in April 2022, which is roughly about the same or little less than it has now. Because after the initial onslaught, they had to withdraw when their lines were overstretched in March and beginning of April. So as you can see, at that stage, this was not about territory, but this was about neutrality. But now, after 3 years, having shed so much blood and treasure, as it were, it has also become partly about territory, particularly because Russia has now constitutionally incorporated 4 of these so-called oblasts, administrative units, into its territory. So now, in fact, I know a lot of people are talking about Russia can give this and give that, take away this and, adjust territory, and there could be peace on that. But I think one needs to understand the Russian constitution, which prohibits the state from ceding any territory to another country. One of the reasons, incidentally, why all the talks with Japan are failing, because Russia cannot cede the 2 disputed islands to Japan by its constitution. So, but that's a different story. But in Ukraine also, I think this expectation that Russia is going to compromise on territory is far-fetched. It may eventually. I'm not excluding anything, but at this point of time, I don't think Russia would compromise on Donbass, definitely, Luhansk. If there is a compromise, maybe it's possible in the southern Kherson region. That is one. As far as Europe is concerned, Tara, I was speaking recently in Jaipur and then after that in another place. And I asked a very simple question, and it is a learned audience. So they were all historians and historians of Russia. And I asked them a very simple question to give me an example starting from 1400 when Russia has attacked Europe.
Exactly. Absolutely, yes.
And unfortunately or fortunately, such examples are not there, except exceptions, of course, like, for example, the Ribbentrop-Molotov agreement, where Russia then sort of incorporated the western part of Ukraine into the Soviet Union, while Poland incorporated certain other parts of Ukraine. So these treaty agreed sort of movements apart, I have never seen, I don't know historically of Russian aggression against Europe per se. As far as the Baltics is concerned, the Baltics never really were a sovereign state. All 3 of them. They were under the suzerainty of either the Nordics or the Poles or the Russians. The wars that were fought between these empires, the Nordics were merely the subjects. They were never the objects for which they were fought. So again, I would not consider the Baltics as an example of Russian aggression against Europe. To sum up, I think Russia is not interested in having NATO on its border. It was pointed out, I think, by the DG that Putin has fought wars in his tenure, and one of those wars was in Georgia. And I think that Georgian war was precisely because of this, because Saakashvili, the then Georgian president, in 2008 misunderstood the meaning of the declaration of NATO in Budapest in April 2008, when they declared that the door is open for Ukraine and Georgia to come into NATO. And he decided that therefore he will launch a war against the rebel republics of Ossetia and Abkhazia. And the Russians sort of responded to that. So therefore, I think the message was given then in 2008 that if there is any attempt to incorporate the Russia's near abroad into Western security arrangements, Russia will respond. Till 2014, it was accepted. In 2014, I think the Americans' overconfidence overtook them, and we have the situation that we have today.
Okay, Anusua, would you like to come in here?
Ma'am, absolutely correct, both the previous speakers, but also sort of how do we see all of these developments really, coming in with the sanctions and US trying to stop the war machine. However, in our previous podcasts, one of the speakers had mentioned and really briefly elaborated on how Russia is the domestic changes or the domestic policies that they are changing. They are very well trying to equip themselves to survive for a few years more. So how do we see the US sanctions really helping in that? And I mean, if Russia is domestically arming themselves, how far are the sanctions really going?
I think we can also to link that to the nuclear question. I mean, are these two linked? Is it a fact that this is a response to this, or is it just that, I mean, a test is not something you can do suddenly. Months and months and months of preparation. So when you say nuclear signaling, that's what I was trying to get at. What, like the DG said, what exactly is he signaling? So that we still haven't got out. And to come, like Anusua said, to the sanctions, which are very, very tight this time, keeping in mind, however, that the pipelines to China continues. The pipeline to Europe continues. So the ones who suffer in the end are us, right? So I don't know how this is going to work out. So maybe the DG might like to come in on this sanctions issue, because this is going to really, and I would then come to perhaps Dr. Unnikrishnan on what effect is this going to have on Russia. Like Anusua says, maybe they'll just withstand it.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kartha. First of all, Putin, said, I already have so many sanctions, so what about some more sanctions on me? That is, of course, on a lighter side. But the current sanction which has been done, basically on the main source of revenue of Russia, is going to hit him hard. Even if the pipelines are there, I don't think the pipelines can really meet the needs of the Chinese or the Indians. It has to go through the sea route, because most of the oil traffic goes through the sea, right? That is point number one. So therefore, that part is going to hurt Russia the maximum. The second thing is India. As far as India is concerned, 50% of our oil was being taken from Rosneft and Montoluco. So these two companies are now under the sanction. So if India continues to buy oil from them, which I believe IOC, I was reading in the newspaper today, IOC and both Reliance have actually said that they will comply by the sanctions, which would mean that India will not be buying oil from these two companies. They amount to 50% of the Indian oil which comes from Russia, which would actually, in terms of money, would be about $18 billion. So therefore, that much of a offset being made for India in a short time frame is going to be very difficult. So that is why I was talking about the off ramping, some way out for this particular change to take place. Although India has not come out with any open direct statement on this issue as to how it is going to meet this challenge, but I believe there are some reports suggesting that there is already a negotiation going on with Saudi Arabia to get oil at a much reasonable price, closer to the Russian oil price. I don't know how that can be managed. It's very difficult because the oil prices are controlled centrally as far as the OPEC is concerned. There is no other source. Venezuela, we are already complying with the sanctions. Iran, we are already complying with the sanctions. So for India, it's a greater hit than China, as you rightly said, but China will also get hit. But China is doing some kind of a trade talk, although their treasury secretary said that a broad framework has been arrived at, and maybe they will strike a deal when they have an apex level meet. But there are some doubts on that issue also. So this is a challenge globally for India and China, and also Russia, because Russia has to somehow survive. If it can't take a hit like this, which is major source of its revenue. My only uh, I think wild guess is that possibly the oil will now get diverted by the other companies which are not under sanction in Russia to be procured oil from. As far as India is concerned, I don't know how much of a exploration is being done, because if 50% was being done by these two big companies, I'm sure the other companies can be routed to divert this shortfall. And maybe there is also some kind of a backdoor negotiations going on to have this transition in a slow and gradual manner, and hope like hell that there is some kind of a peace talk which moves forward as far as Russia Ukraine war is concerned. But adding to this is the problem of the nuclear thing, because this is pushing Russia a little too hard. And I have this gut feeling that don't push Putin too hard. I think Trump will make a major mistake of his life if he pushes Trump. He's not Brezhnev. I mean, who was the guy in Cuban crisis? I think it was Brezhnev, sir, Air Marshal Rajesh.
Yeah,
Brezhnev.
President.
Brezhnev.
No, it was
Brezhnev, listen.
Khrushchev. It was
Khrushchev,
Khrushchev.
yeah. It was Khrushchev. Khrushchev actually, read the logic. I don't know whether Putin will read the logic. So that is my biggest concern. So I would like our two guests to comment on these two issues: the oil challenge, and also how much of a push can Trump give to Putin to ensure that the big red line of the nuclear is not crossed.
Marshal Kumar, would you like to go first?
Yes. My reading is that Putin is signaling Europe not to get too deeply involved into the fight. I think that's his main message. Um, he in the past has put some red lines. So if you recollect, right in the beginning, in February 22, immediately after that, there were nuclear exercises done by Russia. And I think the nuclear signaling at that time was that, Europe shouldn't get directly involved in the conflict. And I think that message was taken very seriously and aptly by Europe, and Europe never got involved directly in the conflict, though there are still reports of European military people training inside Ukraine, etc., etc. But that was the main message. The next time I think a message was given was when the Kerch Bridge was hit in October 2022. And that time, what happened was that Lavrov, I think, made a statement that about the use of tactical nuclear weapons, and then the response from the US was very immediate. There was a ballistic Ohio-class submarine which surfaced in the Arabian Sea, and the CENTCOM commander then boarded that particular submarine to give a message that, and Biden said if Russia uses nuclear weapons, then it'll be Armageddon. And then this, boat surfaces and another boat comes ashore in Gibraltar, same Ohio class submarine. So, and then immediately after that, the Russian foreign ministry made a statement that, nuclear wars cannot be won and therefore should not be fought. So I think the messaging there was very clear that, nuclear threats are not going to be taken lightly. But at the same time, there have been other threats as well. And what actually those threats were related to some red lines which Russia had drawn. And those red lines were repeatedly tested. So this time he's not making any red lines. He's expecting that the adversary will understand the strategic signaling and the nuclear dimension of the conflict and will not go beyond a particular point. So I think that he is signaling to Europe, don't be an obstructionist, because I think the US wants peace talks and Europe doesn't. And what he's trying to tell Europe is that get out of the way and let's get a deal done. So it's quite obvious that he's using this divide between Europe and US to try and bring the conflict to an end, and on his terms. You see, otherwise what will happen is Europe's terms are way too harsh. Withdraw from everything, including Crimea. I mean, nobody's going to give Crimea back. I mean, people start thinking that Crimea will go back to Ukraine, I think they're living in La La Land. So there is a need to be rational on all sides to demand terms for peace. And if peace doesn't come, then what Putin is signaling is that he still has the nuclear option. Though I do certainly believe that he has no intentions of using nuclear weapons unless he is completely pushed to the wall. So he's going to exhaust every single option before he even thinks of a nuclear option. And that's where we stand today. So let's see how this pans out, these sanctions. You see, there's another dimension to the sanctions. It's not just oil. It's also the use of his confiscated assets, especially gold, to be used as collateral for loans, which will then be used to fund Ukraine. I think that is a seriously dangerous precedent. If that happens, then all trust in Western, economic structures, the entire, trust will be gone in all the central banks, and everybody will start pulling their gold out of Europe and US, whoever has it. So I think that's why Belgium voted against using that particular method. So it's not just oil sanctions. There are sanctions on other parts of the thing as well. It is going to hit him hard. But Russians, if you see since 1400s, like said, go back in Russian history, the amount of punishment they are capable of taking and still surviving and striking back, I think, not many nations have that much of a history. So we'll have to wait and watch. I think this is a signaling game, and the signals have been set on both sides. And let's see where then if there are to be any peace talks, whether they will happen or not, whether the Budapest meeting takes place or not, if not now, later, or at any time, and on what terms. I think that it will be, everything is coalescing hopefully to that point, and let's see what happens.
Dr. Nandan, your view on this DG's question?
No, I think Marshal has summed it up very nicely. I don't think the Russians are likely to use nuclear weapons in the conflict with Ukraine. I don't think they have any intention of using it. However, I would say there is one red line, and that red line is actual involvement of Western troops on the ground in Ukraine. If that happens, then Western territory, in that is particularly European territory, will be treated by Russians as targets. Even then, I'm not sure about nuclear weapons, but all I'm saying is that Russia will then expand the targeted territory. That's point number one. Point number two, I also agree with the Air Marshal that the sanctions this time around are likely to hurt. But historically speaking, Russians have shown tremendous resilience, whether we take it as during the Napoleonic Wars or World War I or World War II. So I don't think the situation has, Russian economic situation has reached a stage where we are talking of collapse. I think something else is, I mean, if I may divert for a second, I think something else is happening in global geopolitics. And that is primarily the fact that Trump believes that the war in Ukraine is not America's war. He wants to get out of it and focus on other issues that he thinks are more important. However, if Europe wants to fight a war there, he is happy to supply weapons to them as long as they pay for it and they fund that particular war. But he is not going to give them troops. He does not want to give too much attention to that front. However, while this appeals to what is referred to as the MAGA crowd in the United States, there is a very strong section in the United States that opposes this and prefers the old-fashioned Biden approach, where they think that US must lead against the Russians, US must uphold its relationship with Europe. And these are people who are represented today in Trump's administration by people like Rubio or Kellogg, the negotiator for Ukraine. So there is within the United States, in Washington, actually a political battle going on about what should be the approach to the Ukraine war. And in my opinion, that is what is responsible for the so-called flip-flops of Trump. I mean, look at what he says in Anchorage. In Anchorage, he says we should first address the causes of war and then talk about a ceasefire. Today, he's gone back to that old European position, ceasefire first, negotiations later, which has effectively taken the Russians out from the negotiations because that's not the Russian position. So, there is a battle going on within the United States, and unfortunately or fortunately, that battle is having an effect on everyone. As far as India is concerned, we are, as Tara had mentioned, we are at the receiving end for no asking of ours. But to be very clear, I think India will stop buying oil from Russia. I don't think we are going to stand up there and wave the flag. This is not the battle in which the flag has to be waved. We cannot forget that, forget about politics, but purely economically, the United States is our largest export market. We have the largest surplus with the United States of $40 billion. We don't have it with all the others, with China, Russia, everyone else. We actually run deficits with all of them. So for us, that relationship is very important. It's also important in a different sense. For our development in this time when we are being asked to adhere to various restrictions of climate change, it is the West that is going to provide us a majority of our finances and particularly the technologies. So India has to keep that in mind. And therefore, I know there will be many people who will criticize and say that India has backed out or backtracked and all that. But I don't think that would be correct. I think it would be at this point uh, sagacious for India to definitely reduce the amount of oil it buys. I think we would be wise if we reduced our dependence on Russian oil to maybe something between 15 to 25%, somewhere in between that. That, in my opinion, also judging by what Trump had originally said, would be something that would be acceptable to the Americans. So if there are proponents of those who want India-Russia relations to flourish, then I think they should be looking at areas other than energy in which to develop closer ties. But on oil, we will definitely reduce.
That was very well explained. Anusuya, you had a question?
Right. So, after the explanation of how Trump is trying to end the war, and Russia has also been very, not very, but positive about the talks, and both of them have a particular way of trying to deal with the issue and ending the conflict. But when the question of Europe comes in, how divided is Europe in it? I mean, why would Europe not want the war to end? Or because what do then economies like Hungary and Slovakia that are looking at imports of Russian oil? I mean, what do they do?
If you look at Europe today, I am assuming it's addressed to me. So, if you look at the economy of Europe today, look at where they were in 2022 and where are they today. Today, they are getting steadily deindustrialized. Their capacity to grow is minimal, and on over and above that, settled industries, for example, BASF is the largest industry, chemical industry in Germany, is attempting to relocate to the United States because it is looking for cheaper sources of energy. Earlier, the European model of growth was pillared on cheap Russian oil for production and exports to China for profits. This was how the economy was working. But today, the Americans have blown up the pipeline, and the Americans are telling Europeans, you can't export to China without our permission. You have to look at us first and then decide to export to China. So they are in a very, very difficult economic situation. And the elites that are in control in Europe today, if they were to tomorrow turn around and say, okay, let's stop this war and let's focus on what is happening inside the country, there are many people in their country which are going to who are going to turn around and say, why did you waste these 3 years?
Yeah.
Why did you do this for 3 years, make us spend all this money, tighten our belts, and now turn around and tell us that it was all wasted? So there is a problem that von der Leyen and all these politicians have. So they are scrambling to build the idea of a Russia threat. I understand they're clinging on to power, they want to hold power, and that is instinct of every politician. But the problem is, and that is if you look at what is happening in France today, look at some of the nascent elements happening in Germany, including Britain, look at Keir Starmer's position. You will see that people and protest sort of feelings against governments are rising. The AFD is rising in Germany. The right wing is rising in France. So I think Europe is in a state of flux with the current elites clinging on to the war in Ukraine as the last resort for their holding on to power. Because the raison d'etre for them to be kept in power by the people is lost if everything collapses on Ukraine. So I think Europe is going through a certain important but significant catharsis, and we have to wait and see what they come out of. And the other thing is, from an Indian perspective, for me, Europe today is an important economic partner. Yes, I want to diversify. I don't want to be dependent on anyone. And Europe is a source of economic development and growth that I can cooperate with. But at the same time, Europe is not a significant security partner for me. So when I look at Europe, I don't see Europe as a security contributor to me. So I think when we look at Europe from India, we have to keep that in consideration also. Sorry, I've occupied too much time.
No, no, no. No, it was a perfect articulation of a view which is kind of prevalent as of now all over, including in the government circles. But there are these ifs and buts which are, being thrown. Like you only said that there are people who advertise or advocate that we should continue to, maintain stronger relations with Russia, especially related to the oil, etc. uh, but for that to happen, I think the better course is like in the defense. I can quote the example from defense. We have slowly diversified in the defense. Like initially, we were around 76% of our dependency was on. Then it came down to 67, and finally it's around 36-37% of dependencies on Russia, and we have diversified to Israel, France, and US. If some of the deals had gone through, and if all these problems had not happened post Trump 2.0, I think the equations would have been reversed, and US would have been our largest defense partner as well, because a whole lot of deals are all struck in the pipeline. You had the ISET going, you had the Limoa going, you had all the arrangements, all the agreements which are just short of a NATO country were signed between India and the United States of America, including high-tech cooperation in AI or semiconductors, you name it. Everything was going absolutely, despite the fact that Trump 1.0 happened and then Biden's administration came, nothing changed as far as our defense relations were concerned. So that kind of action will have to be done. But I also advocate that Russia should remain as our hedging strategy. We should not leave Russia out of the lurch. So like you said, 10 to 15%. I would go. If one has to do negotiations, so we do our negotiations with our own point of view, because the Americans are also not doing very great. They have a huge debt situation as far as their economy is concerned. So they also need economic partners. They know that their needs cannot be met without China and India. If India is not having a leverage like rare earth, India does have leverage in terms of pharma, etc. There are some sectors where we are a power to reckon with. So I think we will also be able to exert that necessary pressure for Trump, and that is why you find most of his ministers are now backing out. Initially they all came, all guns blazing against India, whether it was Scott Bessent or even what was his name now, Peter Navarro, Peter Navarro, etc. But now everybody is slowly, Mark Rubio has given out a statement which says that India's US-India relationship goes historically very deep, etc., etc. These are signs where I think there will be some kind of a arrangement or some kind of a negotiations where India's interest will not be harmed to that extent as to what we are expecting it to be. But we have to play our cards close to our chest and not listen to a lot of people who are saying, why don't we declare upfront, that we are not going to do business with A, B, or C. I think that's the way India has been groomed as far as diplomacy and the way it works in the international relation is concerned. So we have to deal the way we know the best. So with that, I think by and large, if I were to sum up uh, the situation, I would say there is a huge uncertainty as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Two, I would feel that Putin also needs to be given an off ramp. If you don't give Putin a chance to come out with some kind of a victorious image, we are going to have some more fireworks to be seen. If you look at the history, while the Russians are also very very resilient and very very resistant, they do not give up easily. whether it was Second World War or even the First World War. But wars between Ukraine and Russia have also been fought. If you go back further deep into the history, and you will realize that the Ukrainians are equally tough, and they also have resisted the onslaught of the Russians for quite some time, till the time this unification started, etc. So if you read the history, that is a very strange thing which I read. So like there was one visitor from BRICS Expert Council chairperson was there with us in our faculty for a discussion, indoor discussion. She said, the world should not believe what everything is seen on the televisions. We consider Ukrainians as our brothers, so we are not taking actions which are absolutely, totally, which would be rightly termed as war. That was her justification, and that is why she said we have named it as special military operations and not a war. So she doesn't consider the current thing which is going on between Russia and Ukraine as war. But at the same time, she also mentioned that they are our brothers, which means what you see a Russian soldier fighting, the Ukrainians are no good or bad. They are also of a similar nature. Their average age has gone to about 45, 46, yet they are fighting. So I think there has to be some way out where both are given out some kind of a victory. Yes, we have won, and then this war can actually be termed as ending. So closure seems to be the difficulty here. And last point is that economic diversification for India is a must. If we don't do that, I think India's growth will be impacted in the long run, not in the short run, but in the long run, we will get impacted both in the defense and the economy. I think these are my final concluding comments. We can ask concluding comments from our yeah, and the nuclear bit has to be carefully managed. That nuclear saber rattling which is going on, that needs not only between US and Russia. I think has to be managed through a committee of nations, through various powers that be, including China, including India. We have to play a role to ensure that the conflict doesn't go anywhere near even a tactical nuclear weapon. Thank you. I'll stop here.
I think there's a lot of other interesting areas we could have gone into, especially with Marshal Kumar. If it's aimed at Europe, Europe's nuclear power is basically France. The UK doesn't have an independent nuclear deterrent. So will we then see a divide between? I mean, because today President Trump's reaction to this whole test was very, very. It was very casual. He shouldn't be firing missiles. He should be doing something else. So if that divide happens, then you're going to go back to a couple of decades. But we'll have to just take a couple of questions, and whoever wants to answer can answer. Anusua, can we
Can I
take?
just come up on that issue
Yes,
of
yes.
the European nuclear power? So we must understand that European nuclear response is purely NATO, and which means purely the US. You see, the UK has only they don't have ICBMs, they don't have air-launched weapons. So in their triad, they only have nuclear submarines. France also has only two. They have airborne and they have nuclear submarines. They don't have ballistic missiles. So if any ballistic missiles are to be fired, they will be of US origin. And all the tactical nuclear weapons belong to the US. So everything that is stationed in Europe which is a tactical nuclear weapon, is of US origin. So I mean, comparing the capabilities of both sides, but I don't think it's going to come to a nuclear this thing. Though France has made in the recent past some comments on whether they would like to take on the nuclear umbrella of Europe,
Yeah.
etc. But they'll have to spend hugely to do that, and I don't think they are in a state to do that, considering their current instability and the fact that their government is changing every few months. So I think though Macron has indicated that, whether he has a capability to follow through on what he has said is very moot. Now, as far as the oil is concerned, just digressing a little bit, before the Ukraine conflict, our import of oil from Russia was only 2%. So it's not as
Yeah.
if our relationship
Less-
is based on oil.
Less than that.
Yes. So I mean, it's not as if our relationship was based on oil. I think our relationship started getting based on oil because Europe stopped buying oil and the whole world market got destabilized. And the US told us, why don't you buy from Russia so that the oil prices don't spike? And I think that was the reason why we had Russian oil. Otherwise, we were always buying oil from the Middle East. And now we must understand that there are more number of producers, despite the fact that Venezuelan oil has has been capped, Iranian, now Russian, but Guyana is is increasing production tremendously. Brazil has significantly increased production. West Africa has significantly increased production. So it's not as if more oil hasn't come on the market. If actually you allow Venezuelan, Iranian, and Russian oil to flow freely in the world markets, I think oil prices will completely crash. So these are all factors that have influenced these particular decisions. So Russians will not feel bad if we don't buy oil from them, because we never used to buy oil originally from them. But we have to maintain a relationship with Russia. We have to take care of our economy, prevent an oil spike, which will affect our economy very, very badly. So despite all that, you see, immediately after the sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft, the oil price went only from 60 to 65. It didn't jump up to 70, 80 or 90. So I think the world is oversupplied with oil. So in this current status, we can play our cards and we can balance on both sides to ensure that our interests are not harmed.
Okay, we'll just take two questions, I think there are. We'll just take quick answers to that. So there it is. News reports that this wave of sanctions could reduce India and China's oil buys from Russia. How likely? I think this has partially been answered. But nonetheless, if anyone wants to take that question.
I mean, I think this will be already answered by Air Marshal Rajesh also. The only thing which I wanted to add was that grant something to the Russians in the sense that it did help India maintain a very stable oil prices for the last 5 years. Earlier the prices used to rise quite regularly because everybody was dependent on that Middle East oil. So therefore, our purchases were dictated by OPEC prices. So there was definitely an advantage of taking the Russian oil. We benefited from the opportunity. I would just like to add that factor into it.
Yeah, I think that was still a very good point by Marshal, because one tends to forget that we never took oil in the first place.
Yeah,
so,
but you never paid more than 90 rupees for your oil. For the last 5 years, it has been steady at that.
So there's a ask from our regular guest, Mr. Tadani. If anyone wants to take this.
So I think today's, like DG mentioned, that today's newspaper says that IOC will review its purchase of Russian oil. So, and even Reliance has said that they will review their purchase of Russian oil. So I think they are going to reduce the amount of Russian oil that they'll buy. And I think somebody referred earlier in the conversation that we are trying to negotiate with the Middle East to kind of lower prices. But I think that refers to, the Middle East used to charge us what is called the Asian premium, which used to vary between sometimes between $0.50 to about $2.50 per barrel, used to be the Asian premium. And that was historically because the flow of oil was from the Middle East through the Persian Gulf, through the Red Sea, Suez Canal, and into Europe. And Europe used to buy as compared to Asia, 3 or 4 times more oil. Now the situation has actually reversed. Europe is buying much less oil from the Middle East, and India and China are buying much more. So the Asian premium, the logic for the Asian premium, we've been arguing with the OPEC, is that it's lost now, because Asian premium was basically because you had to send ships which were otherwise going towards Europe, towards Asia. You had to divert them, and therefore it added an additional cost to them. Today, that is not the case. So I think what is being negotiated is that the Asian premium should go down, so that Middle East, more oil can be purchased off the Middle East to the extent that they have the capacity. So I think there is going to be a dial down from Russian oil towards Mid East oil, and we are also purchasing a huge amount of oil from US. And don't forget, Guyana oil is US oil because it's ExxonMobil which is selling it to us. So to that extent, the flows from North America also are quite significant in our energy mix today.
I'd just like to add here just one small element. There is no Indian company, private or government, that will buy from a sanctioned entity. Indian oil companies were all buying from Rosneft, not from Lukoil.
Yes.
Rosneft. And Rosneft sanctioned. There'll be no Indian entity that will buy from Rosneft.
Absolutely. That point has been clarified in statements also by various companies, so that that point we need. The only thing is, the further the oil comes from, the greater the cost becomes. So therefore, I'm talking of the domestic market. The politicians will start getting worried when the dollar price the barrel price goes beyond acceptable limits. And as such, India is a country of elections. We will finish with Bihar, then Sir will start, and then something else will start. So there are other factors which keep on playing. Everything doesn't go by logic, I suppose.
So so overall, everything is still up in the air. I mean, we have in the end
Yes.
not really nothing. There is no glimpses of peace anywhere on the horizon, unless there is a dramatic Putin-Trump meeting, in which case perhaps. So we will end this here, and I just need to thank all our panelists. And I think it was an excellent.
Dr. Tara, just before you end, nobody talked about Zelensky.
I know. I
The
was just going to say
one
that.
of the one of the major actors in all this. What is going to happen to him? That was something we missed out. I think next time we will take that into account. We should discuss that personality as well.
Absolutely, yes. And I think what Nandan said about people's political careers hanging on this war applies to Zelensky as well. He'll just disappear. So it
Yes.
was fascinating. I mean, I at least learned so much from the panel. So I'm so grateful to all of y'all. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you again on another class podcast. Thank you and good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, Jay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.